restoration.
Hmm.
So we are aware of the banking system, fiat currencies, and a lot of people talk about how it was constructed. There are two videos on our app, which also discuss in detail how the financial system was structured and how each portion of the world governance participated. Well, I want to talk about, we've talked enough about how it was broken and how we were all controlled. Let's talk about what we need to look at as we restructure how we have, I guess you would say, how we exchange goods and services amongst each other at a time of transition. Of course, ultimately, human beings will eventually go to full manifestation. There won't be a need for money exchanges. There won't be a need for currencies. There won't be a need for any of these things. There certainly won't be a need for a central bank digital currency because that won't work. They also tried, the Federal Reserve also tried to register some more agreements in the Hall of Records this weekend too, trying to re-implement their central bank digital currency. That was another one of the ones they did.
Mm.
They're just not giving up, you know. I ran into Chinese people everywhere, and these are members of the Chinese deep state, quite obviously. I don't think any normal Chinese citizen would be dancing around, singing something, and chanting around an African man who wasn't entirely human either. But nonetheless, we have to have a solution in place for every single problem that we currently have and a way to get there. So our ultimate goal is to have freedom in the financial system. So let's talk about that a little bit more. Okay, so by freedom, we mean we want to be sovereign. Which means we do not need to give custody to a third-party entity, namely in this case, a bank or a government, in order to manage our own affairs. Ultimately, that's what we're looking to do. But for now, we have both of these things. So is there a place for these people in a going forward situation? Well, banks were always supposed to be service providers to you, the people. That's the way they were originally designed. But then the whole control system that I explained in those other videos came into play. But we have to step it backwards, one step at a time, with the most important step being accountability. So right now, in the past, we have had fiat currency, which means that governments can go ahead in accordance with supply and demand and print as much currency as they want to at any given moment in time. This is a thing of the past. We are not going to do this anymore. We have taken out fiat currency and we have backed currently every single human's money and every single citizen of every single nation, even if they do not have a bank account, with gold. What does that do and why is that so important? Looking for my eraser here. You know, people talk about a lot about fiat currency all the time, but they don't really talk about exactly what fiat currency is. So let's break that down so you understand where we are going as a citizen of this planet. Okay. Okay. Fiat currency still has some level of accountability to it. Currently, or the way it used to be, is the Federal Reserve was always just a face front, cannon food, if you will, for the cabal, for the people that actually several layers up would have gotten the allocations of money from the alpha system. So you would have had the Federal Reserve in here, and then underneath them, all the central banks. A lot of people think if the Federal Reserve goes down, then and central banks go down and tier one banks go down, that they're free. But it's not that easy and it's not that simple. Do we need these things in the future? The answer to the question is no. Could they actually participate for the next few years in a transitionary way to a full sovereign system that would be beneficial for the all, meaning all humans, because there are many people that don't even know anything about what a fiat currency is or why a gold-backed currency would be better. Okay, so the Federal Reserve has had the right to print currencies based on permissions and programs, some of them black programs, we know a lot about those, as needed in order to fulfill the program. Now, we've all heard about the $100 toilet seat that we see going on in the military budgets and a number of budgets around the world. And that was created so that they could have more fiat currency into the financial system under their control. Now, fiat currency does have some accountability to it. It does work on supply, which ultimately from the alpha system is endless. It is in both cases. The ratio of gold, or the value of gold, to the actual supply of money is irrelevant in both cases. In many years, I should say past, there was a 35-to-1 ratio, and then that went to a 50-to-1 ratio for governments. So what does that mean? That means for every dollar value in gold, you could issue $50. And the same thing goes in the fiat world, except the fiat world started basing, they took gold out of the equation as it relates to backing the currency. They installed the good faith of the governments, plural, around the world, and then they based it on supply. And this is actually the reason why BlackRock, Vanguard, and some of the others became so wealthy, because it was based off of production contracts. So currently, the backing for all currencies worldwide is production contracts. Production contracts could be war. That used to be one of them. That no longer exists under the Treaty of Versailles. There could also be a treaty. For example, country A and the Banana Republic agree that they're going to produce grain on the one hand and produce oranges on the other, and they're going to exchange those, and they each do a production contract for the respective goods and services on both sides. Now, production contracts are still important in a gold-backed currency situation because you still need to have that demand. Production contracts and demand. So on the black market and in systems like Aladdin, for example, which is used to be BlackRock's system, they would create fictitious demand in order to increase the supply of money. Fictitious demand would be, we're going to buy 100 million barrels of oil from Russia in a month. Are we going to consume 100 million barrels of oil in a month? The answer to the question is no. But what it does is it puts a lien on the oil reserves at the rate of 100 million barrels of oil a month. That's a lot of demand you just created right there, fictitious or otherwise. So one thing the cabal doesn't understand is in a fiat system, we have derivatives. You know, I think Greenspan's still alive, I think, maybe, still living in Monaco. But derivatives, okay, how are they created and how do we have to fix this issue? So the production contracts would then go from whoever creates it, say it's between two nations in a treaty or between two companies or it's Shell Oil. It didn't really matter because the lien then goes against those reserves. You cannot re-lien those reserves. The production contract would eventually make its way to the Alpha system, and then Alpha system would provide the supply of money to meet the demand. Is this making sense to you, Mike? Are you still with me?
Yeah, it's making a lot of sense.
Okay.
And I'm not a mathematician, so this is making a lot of sense, though.
Okay, I'm just trying to break it down so everybody can understand. So it helps if we don't have a Miss Sunny, we have a Mr. Mike, so he can. I have someone. Well, just to make sure that I'm checking myself to explain to you how fiat currencies work. So ultimately, your currencies around the world are still backed by production contracts.
Mm-hmm.
Are some of those production contracts mining contracts from places like Rio Tinto for mining of gold? Absolutely. Did China come in and try to issue their own production contracts to various African nations, to the United States against the BLM, and many other countries in the world, including Canada, Brazil, Chile, for copper, and a number of other nations? Yes, they did. But they have forgotten that for decades, if not centuries, the same people, generations ago, have been issuing production contracts, therefore a lien against in-ground assets of countries, because Russia's not pumping 100 million barrels of oil a month, as far as I know. You know, they're not mining, hundreds of thousands of metric tons of gold in Ghana right now per month. It's not possible. It's not being done. But the lien is there saying all that gold, however, hundreds of thousands of metric tons, if not millions, if not billions, if not trillions, hundreds of trillions, even more in this case, of liens, production contracts issued, liens filed, the Order of the Dragon would then, or the Order of the Black Sun, would then send that lien to the Alpha system, and Alpha would then supply to meet the demand. So that money already went out. So when I said to you that we've been fighting constantly for years now against the Shanghai Exchange's leverage of assets they may have agreed to, in-ground assets, for example, of rare earth minerals and all of these other things on the African continent and around the world, and they have failed to actually place a lien against it because there's already a lien in place. So the financial system recognizes this was already done, and therefore now it's going to say, well, that belongs to these people. So what we have done on our side of it is we have taken all of these liens, and they're still there because we don't need governments and deep state puppets to do stupid things. So we actually assigned those liens over to you, the people. Now, by people, we mean all of the citizens in your nation divided equally and evenly. Therefore, now alpha can create yet another supply, because a lot of this money that came out for these is already long gone. So now I can create a new standard under the GOLD agreement, reassign the lien to 8 billion people on Earth, and then I can say, okay, I've got gold, I've got silver, I've got all of these different metals and a few things like unum pentium and other elements that you may not be aware of that are not in our periodic table at this moment. And I have taken you, the person, and said, okay, I've divided up all of this by, so if I take, for example, the Banana Republic has X amount of gold and X amount of citizens. I've divided that up by the individual. And so now, sitting in the repository under your name, you actually have X amount of gold, which can then yield you X amount or Y amount of currency. You still following me, Mike? Did I lose you?
This is this is amazing. It makes a lot more sense.
Okay.
So that money is just channeled back to the people and not
that's
to the
right.
state.
Well, yeah, your assets are all there and your gold is there, your currency is there, but now what am I missing, Mike? Do you know?
No.
I'm not a good teacher. Okay, darn it. I'm trying here. We're missing the demand.
Right. Okay.
Okay?
I'm keeping up.
So we still need supply and demand, even though currencies are backed by metals and various in-ground resources. So what is the demand? Okay, this person may have a project. They may participate in a program like life assurance, as an example. So say life assurance kicks off in the United States. Contrary to Biden's belief, we actually have somewhere around 330 million people, plus several more million here for school and whatnot, currently living in the United States. So if I divide the U.S.'s reserves, which are far more vast than you could possibly think of, and then I have X amount of currency that I can issue against those reserves individually, then I can say this human needs health care. They need free health care. They shouldn't have to pay for said health care. So now I can issue them life assurance. And now I have created my what, Mike?
Your demand.
Yay!
So we're creating new demand. Like we had old demand, and now we're creating new demand through projects and through actually benefiting the people?
That's right.
Okay.
So,
got it.
In effect, we could still do oil production contracts at normal prices, as one example, and we can lower the cost of petrol or gas at the pump by saying this human wants lower gas prices. Anybody in your country object to lower gas or petrol prices at the pump? Anyone? Would you be sad if you went and paid half the price you pay now? No, I don't think anybody's going to be mad at me for that one. So if we did a production contract that says prices of petrol could go down, then I just take a little part of this person's currency allocation. I assign it to low petrol price. And now I've created the demand, and now I sourced my supply. Make sense?
But would the suppliers take a hit on their earnings?
No.
Okay.
Right now, all the black market oil, for example, that floated around that actually made money, that doesn't make any money anymore because production contracts are not abundant So they got black market production contracts at around, black market doesn't pay as well as on market.
Right.
So if the market says, and I didn't check it today, so forgive me, say it's $70 a barrel, give or take, for a barrel of oil. They are now still selling that at pennies on the dollar. The same thing happened in Iraq. That's why we've been in Iraq so long. It's a war zone, sanctions, blah, blah, blah. But, on average, they issue production contracts, then black market, at about $25 a barrel. Standard going rate. The only one that doesn't make money, now for this, it maybe costs them $1 total per barrel to ship it, drill it, and refine it. But so they're still making good money, aren't they?
Yep, absolutely.
But here's the rub. Now you take the Seven Sisters, or the largest oil companies in the world, and they're paying, this price, and you're paying, if there's approximately 42 gallons for you Americans, I haven't translated that into liters, but 42 gallons of oil in a barrel, we're kind of getting what in the where, aren't we?
Yeah.
But we can do the same thing with food production and all of this. So will the oil producers lose money? The answer to the question is no. But we need the demand to be more in the production contracts, to be in favor of the people.
Well, they actually will make more money, won't they? Because it will be easier to purchase.
Right. Yep. And we have a few other things we'll go over too, but I wanted to touch base on derivatives. So everybody talks about the derivative crisis. It's all over the news, but do you even know what they actually are? Okay. So derivatives. So they take that same production contract at probably some ridiculous 100 million barrels of oil, and then they issue against that production contract derivatives. But the buyer must produce 10% of the total amount of the production contract. It's a little bit of accountability there for the deep state, but not too much. So if you're selling 100 million barrels of oil a month, allegedly, and you do this large contract, you still have to come up with the 10% of the production contract to issue derivatives in the entire amount for the whole life of the contract. Those derivatives would then be sold to your BlackRock, your Vanguard. Okay. Etal, because there's a lot of other companies that bought them too. Now, what happened here? So that's a lot, that's trillions of dollars in oil right there, just the one contract we're talking about. So what happens? Okay, the production contract, the 10% of trillions of dollars is still hundreds of billions of dollars. So where did the Chinese deep state go wrong? The 10% always came from the alpha system. And the alpha system would in turn buy derivatives. And all roads lead to my predecessor, but now me. So here I am. So why are you having such a problem putting new liens against production contracts? Number one, you already did it once. There's a lien already there. You haven't paid back the money. The derivatives have been no good because there's no production actually happening. Number two, you don't have the 10% of hundreds of billions, if not trillions, or hundreds of trillions of dollars to make this happen. And this is why, although Chinese deep state may have thought that they had an ace in the hole this past weekend with some demon friend of theirs, I always sit here and I go, you're going around in a circle. And I keep scratching my head. Do we need to issue derivatives off a production contract and an asset-based trading system? The answer to the question is no. Would we be willing to help the banking system clean up this mess that was created by my predecessor in cooperation with their former bosses who no longer have any power? The answer to the question is yes. Because we have to take steps backwards to get back to an asset-based system so we do not blow up the entire world. We do not blow up every company in the world, every farmer in the world, because these production contracts could be anything from avocados to barrels of oil or to oranges, to anything you see traded in the commodities futures market. So BlackRock is looking at all their big assets, and they're saying to themselves, oh, we've got all these assets, but we have zero liquidity, and we can't make those assets good without the 10% and without an exit buyer for their derivatives. So they're going around in the circle, and then all roads lead to, well, what do we do next? Well, let's try to hack the alpha system. And here we go. This is where Project Lincoln Logs comes in, because you can't leave these people an inch. The NSA has been taking orders from the Chinese and the British for weeks, months, years, decades, ever since they were formed all those decades ago. They have always belonged to the Order of the Dragon, just like NATO does. So everything you see NATO doing in the news, you see that's not positive. You're talking to your now Chinese elders, or you're talking to the British faction. We've even had participation recently from the German faction, who were told that this weirdo machine in Saudi Arabia is going to give them access again. It's not going to give you access again. If you don't understand anything I just said, you'll never have access again. Never, never. Why? Because you don't understand what it's like to create a banking system where it's a win-win situation for all parties involved. But this time, it's going to be a win for the people. In other words, all those lovely savings you've enjoyed, ridiculous hundreds of percentage points of profits, are not yours. They're not yours to take right now, and they're not yours to give right now. Could we actually restructure this in a way to where the people get their portion and you get yours? Yes, we could. But you're not willing to accept the fact that you don't even understand where the money came from in the first place. It's kind of like those silver spoon babies. You grow up, your parents have money, they give you money for everything you could have ever wanted under the sun, but you don't know where they got it from, what they had to do to make it. You know, you might see your parents working hard, but what exactly does your father do? Nor do you care, or your mother, or whoever is the breadwinner in your family, nor do you care. Because you've got a Ferrari, and you've got this, and you've got that. You just didn't understand how it all worked in the background. So right now, it is structured to go it alone, meaning we will do our own production contracts. The savings will go to the people. We don't care about making a dime. We don't need to make a dime. There's no need for us to make a profit on selling anything. And the individuals that decide to form a company, that's also a production line. Say you're going to okay, well, we've got a production contract for oranges, but now I need to get them out to all the people. So distribution of said item and hiring of other people to work with you also creates demand. So when people are saying, oh, I want to buy a house and I want to buy it for free and I shouldn't have to have a mortgage and all of those types of things, to some degree it's possible, but on a limited basis, or you're going to devalue every currency on earth because there's no demand. It's what we call dead money, meaning it's not productive money. It's not going to create a new chain of homes. It's not going to do these types of things. Now, if you're building something, you're building a new subdivision, or you're building a group of homes, in a particular area where there are not any, and your sewage systems and all of those things that go along with it, that is a demand. That's new production warrants new money. They kind of go hand in hand together. So this is what I just explained to you, where we came from and where we are going. And that actually is what defines an asset-based trading system. People on the internet keep talking about QFS and it's going to be gold backed and all of these things are happening and so on and so forth. Do you know even why that's important? What does that mean for you, the people? That means for every dollar in your pocket, or British pound or euro or whatnot, that means for every 50 of those you got in your pocket, or any other currency for that matter, euro, you've got $1 in value in gold. Now, when people talk about the death of the petrodollar and the birth of the asset-based dollar, they're talking about all those production contracts I just explained to you that back your dollar. Now, how do we handle this with US dollars? Because the US dollar is the world's trade currency for most of the commodities out there. You must first buy dollars, which also is another cost, in order to buy the production of gold, or the production of silver, or the production of this or that, of oil. So all those production contracts for the last several years have been tied to the value of the dollar. That's how the dollar gets so strong. So all of those liens that we talked about over here created the supply, the demand, which then triggered the supply. So most other countries only get currency or create that demand as their gross domestic product increases. But they can't include any of the commodities that are traded on the commodities future market, because all those are traded in dollars. Now, in a multipolar world, they get the credit for those production contracts. So this is what I was trying to explain to you about Russia several months back, and what Russia was trying to do when they offered the European Union both natural gas and oil contracts, production in rubles. If you want our oil and you want our gas, you will do so in rubles. Because why? That backs the ruble. Making sense?
Yes, absolutely. So it no longer backs the dollar, it backs their country. So just a clarification, so a derivative is a promise to purchase?
A derivative, yes. Well, a derivative is based on future value of a contract.
Oh, okay. Okay. So this contract right now, if I bought the stuff right now, it would be $10. But if it matures in 10 years, it would be $100?
Okay. So when you buy a derivative, for those of you that have never done any kind of stock trading or bond trading, you'll have, say, we did a 10-year production contract. And usually contained in that production contract, you have a few things. This is where creating the demand over here. You would have a term certain. So there would be a term on there. So 10-year production contract. Let's use 10 for purposes of this. You would have, whether that was a monthly production or an annual production. So how often do you have the supply? And you have, so if it's a 10-year term, you would have 10% of the entire 10-year in cash, and most of the time in US dollars. Now, what is a derivative? Okay, so as long as you have the 10%, that goes to pay for like the insurance wraps and all of those things required to issue bonds. First, a bond is issued, a corporate bond usually, or it could be a government bond in the case if it's a government-owned production. So in other words, like we talked about Botswana in the news today, the government actually owns the diamonds, not the people in their mind. So they would issue a bond for the entire production contract, and they would issue derivatives off of that bond. So derivatives are almost like coupons. So they're collateralized debt obligations, CDOs, collateralized, there's another couple of terms for derivatives. I'm sorry, it's just not on the top of my head. So the bond itself then has babies, so to speak, in the form of derivatives based on anything from interest to the total amount of the production contract to 100 times the amount of the production contract based on various things that could happen. Inflation could happen. You're actually going to say oil is worth X today. In 10 years from now, it might be worth Y. It might have a significant increase. But when you're buying the derivative, Mike, you buy it at like 20 cents on the dollar. So, or 10 cents on the dollar. So as this contract reaches full maturity, this remains an asset on your balance sheet for the entire time, usually bearing, not all the time, but usually bearing a zero coupon. But you're buying it at this, so at the end of 10 years, when it matures, it's going to be worth one whole dollar. So even though you bought it for 20 cents, do you see where the investment is now?
Got it. Got it.
So that's how it works in a fiat system. But in an asset-based system, we don't need to do any of that. I mean, you're still going to have a term of the contract. The money will become available to say you produce widgets. You make television sets, Mike. You got a lot of them behind you right now. So say you make television sets, and I say, okay, I'm going to start needing television sets because we just installed electricity in this area of South America or Africa or even the United States that doesn't currently have electricity. So I know that there are about 100 million people that are going to need television sets over the course of the next 10 years. And then, of course, they break and then people will need to replace them and whatnot. So I do a 10-year production contract on and you say, okay, well, Kim, I can't right now with my current staff and my current facilities, I can't produce that many televisions.
Right.
And then, of course, there's shipping, and then there's all kinds of issues there with that. So I'd like to build one near the Banana Republic where we did the 10-year production contract. So we're going to be supplying this area. I want to move to this area. And I say, okay, I understand. So instead of issuing derivatives and bonds and all of that to raise the capital to pay for the entire production contract, I don't have to do that because you tell me, okay, I'm going to hire 100 people. Okay, so I'm going to take all of these people, all 100 of them, and I'm going to take a little bit of their Y currency, and I'm going to put it all together, and I'm going to pay for the first year's production up front, plus salaries and all of those things, and then you're going to take this capital that you've been provided in an asset-based trading system, and you are going to now fund your new manufacturing plant and increase production. Well, you still have to give me X amount of television sets every month as you promised. Yes. Will you have to increase your production, say, in the second year in order to accommodate for the lack of production in the first? Yes, you will. But you will have accounted for that in the amount of staff that you're hiring. You're providing long-term jobs to all these 100 people that you're going to hire. So that creates a demand. And then on top of all that, we have a new production of televisions, which also creates a demand. Plus we have You just built a new building, that also creates a demand. So we're creating demand on demand on demand, and we don't need to go through all that leveraging process. And my cost of television sets are going to be lower, even though I'm increasing wages.
Yeah.
Now you with me?
That makes sense. Right.
Okay. So why do we get paid nothing, and in some cases on the African continent, zero, or they give you an asset, which means absolutely nothing to them because no one will buy it anyway. It's because they increase their profit. They have a thing for making 200, 300, 400, 500% on all their production contracts because they've got so many men in the middle. You know, you've got, don't forget the white shirts that are in the middle too, commodities futures traders, all those people. Then you've got the BlackRock people that are in the middle. And there's too many of those people making hundreds of thousands, if not millions, if not billions of dollars per year, just so you have to pay a ridiculous price at the pump. The same thing goes for eggs and food and every single thing you could possibly think of that you consume down here. But you need to start receiving some of the benefits. That is where the system failed. That is why no one in this world, including myself, is going to ever provide those Chinese elders trillions of dollars to support those production contracts, even if I would release those liens. It's never going to happen. Never going to happen.
Yeah.
Until my demands are met. It's just like I told the Federal Reserve when they said that they wanted to talk and all of this. And I said, well, you're going to have to come here. We're going to sit down. And then they said, okay, well, great, we'll do that. But we have needs. Well, I have needs too, and so do you. I'm a very needy person right now. I need a lot. But once you understand the mechanism, it's not an exclusive system. It's an inclusive system. And those of them that work for these organizations that may or may not understand what I just told them would actually understand we made a place for them should they ever decide to come forward. But that time is short. And it's running out because we are going to go with Plan B, which is the go it alone system, where I don't need you. See?
Yeah.
You don't need them. It will be rockier if we do. In other words, we're going to have to come up with a lot of production right quick because you're not going to be buying TVs from Samsung much longer or any of those places. You have to really think about what you're doing. I know you say they're all bad and evil people, but you're going to think, maybe they weren't so bad when you can't go down to the store and buy a bag of Doritos. Not that I would want to do that. I would never do that, actually. That's disgusting, but maybe somebody else does, you know. Or you can't get your favorite pair of shoes, or you can't get, you know. You don't think about all the little creature comforts that exist within your day, which come from one of their corporations and eventually one of their production contracts. We can make this easy and we can make it hard. If they want us to make it hard, we're ready. We are in position. We are ready. We have thought long and hard about every single existing production contract. Why? Because I have a copy of them all. Isn't that amazing how that happens? And then we have just backed down and reproduced all of those different industries and estimated how long it will take to create production lines where the cost, the end cost of the user is at least 50% lower, if not more in some cases, than it is right now, and I can still pay Mike's television production company. And you're still going to make good money at your corporation on your project if you have a for-profit project. We're not leaving you out in the cold. We're not telling you you have to starve. We're basically just telling you that you're saving money because you have no debt load. You have no interest you're paying on your factoring against that contract. You're not paying anything against that contract. You don't have a line of credit to buy rare earth minerals to put in your TVs to make your LEDs work. You don't have any of that. You have no overhead. Imagine how quickly you can become successful, make plenty of money, as long as you're not charging $10,000 for a $50 television set. Fair?
Yeah.
So how do you fix a global commerce system in the interim without disrupting society too much? This is the way you do it. Very simple. I know I just blew everybody's mind. I'm sorry about that. But I just wanted to give you a general idea on the things that our teams work on constantly, day in and day out, to come up with still an amenable system where banks still are relevant, they're still service providers, they're still moving money around, those types of things. They're ensuring production contracts and draw schedules and all of these things that need to take place. You know, we even have room for people that are average everyday Joes that work for the IRS that just go there and have a job. We have plenty of work, plenty of production to manage, lots of different things to do on our end. And remember, we're starting from ground zero, essentially, you know. So that's plan B, go with a loan plan. And then there's, of course, a plan A, which would be more amenable, where people actually come to the party, you know, not forcing us to, you know, have our own militaries, for example, right off the bat. We have them now, but they're not active in the same way. And that about wraps up today's World Situation Report with...
Thanks, Kim.
And that wraps up